Alrighty, so as of right now, you're live streaming on YouTube. If you want to introduce yourselves and kind of kick it off, you're free to do so.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Marianne DeChristopher. I'm the substance abuse coordinator for the State University of New York System Administration. We're pleased to be here this afternoon. It's my overarching job to try to develop an infrastructure among all the campuses to support alcohol and drug programs. I'm pleased to have with us here this afternoon two of our colleagues, Lauren Johnson, who's the College Prevention Coordinator at Purchase, and Dr. Dolores Cimini from the University at Albany. I know we only have a short amount of time here this afternoon. We're going to walk through our presentation, but we really want to hear from you also. So with that said, Lauren?
Yeah, hi. So as Marianne had said, I'm Lauren Johnson. I work over at Purchase College in the Wellness Center. Really excited to be here to talk about self-care. So what is self-care? Self-care is the practice of taking action to preserve and improve one's own health and taking an active and intentional role in protecting one's own health and well-being. So the key words there are active and intentional. They're things that you really need to intentionally do in order to make changes in your life. Self-care is especially important during times of stress. So definitely a time like right now, self-care is very, very important. So a lot of times when I'm working with students in the Wellness Center and we talk about self-care and developing a self-care regime, I hear things like, I don't have time for that, or I feel really selfish taking time for myself when I have so much going on. And as SUNY student leaders, I'm sure you all are very familiar with this. And I'd like to reference the airplane analogy. So when you get on an airplane, the flight attendant comes on and gives a safety demonstration, right? And so they say, if we lose cabin pressure, oxygen masks will come down. And if you're traveling with a small child or somebody who can't help themselves, make sure that you put on your own oxygen mask before anybody else's. And that's very true with self-care too. So if you don't put on your own oxygen mask first, you're not going to be helpful for anybody else, any of your peers, your family, your coworkers, anything like that. So it's very important to make that time to take care of yourself and to figure out what it is that is helpful for you to increase your well-being and your happiness. So without self-care, research tells us that people are susceptible to chronic stress, to burnout, to mental health symptoms like depression and anxiety. So it's very important that, especially in times like this, where we're experiencing a lot of high stress, that we implement self-care regimes. So self-care regime is essentially a toolbox of different techniques and tools that you have at your ready that you could practice daily or as needed, that you have them available already if you're experiencing big times of stress so that you can use them as needed. They're things that you can use, like I said, daily, regularly, or as needed. Self-care is a really individualized practice. So although we're going to go over a lot of really great tips here today, it's really important that you do a self-assessment and you try some things on to see what works for yourself. So I'm excited to hear more throughout our presentation so that we can talk about how you might be able to develop a self-care regime for yourself.
Okay. I'm going to continue now and talk with you about the various aspects of well-being that we all experience. So as human beings, we all know that we do not exist in a vacuum. We're not one-dimensional people. We live in a complex environment, and our individual aspects of ourselves interact with our environment. And in front of you on the slide, you see the elements of the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's model of resiliency, well-being. There are similar models of wellness and well-being that have been put forth, especially for college students, since the 90s, and there's a lot of research that's been done on these. So you see them there, the various aspects, individual, spiritual, intellectual, social, physical, environmental, and all of these interact with each other. In addition to that, if we look at this another way, we can see ourselves interacting at several levels of our world. So one-to-one as individuals with other people, with either one other person or small groups of people, environmental, and that's with our immediate environment, such as our campus, our residence hall rooms, our student leader groups, and the like. Our communities, so going beyond our campus, our work, our leadership positions in Albany, and interacting with the student assembly as a broad organization across campus. So interacting with our community. And then the highest level is really how we influence policy and interacting with policy and making change and advocating along those lines. Those things can be very, very stressful to us. So it's important to really know how we can balance all these aspects of our lives and all of the areas that we interact with as complex human beings. Sometimes when we get stressed, it can compromise our effectiveness and our resilience in any one of these areas that you see here. And we may become depressed, we may become anxious, we may have our academic performance compromised to some extent. And it's really important for us to be aware of that, and particularly aware of how anxiety or depression might impact our lives, especially in this time of COVID. Research indicates, in fact, that if we look at college students, the biggest issue that we encounter in counseling centers, and I am a psychologist, so I talk with a lot of students, the biggest issue that we encounter is anxiety. And what other time is there than right now during COVID that we could experience more anxiety? So it's important for us to be aware of that. Let's go to the next slide.
Well, actually, prior to advancing to the next slide, I just wanted to add in here that these 8 areas of wellness aren't just for those on, campus. These apply to the faculty. These apply to, parents and friends also. So,
yes,
with that
absolutely.
said, strategies. Yes.
Yes, strategies to help ourselves and to get
Right.
assistance and support. So I'm going to take this one, right? So.
Well, actually, no.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. So I also wanted to indicate here that you're part of student assembly. You really play a critical role on each and every campus. You're really the creme de la creme here, okay? You're leaders here. So on one hand, you have to take care of yourself, okay? That's first. But then you have to be able to look at everybody else around you too. And if there's others struggling, there's others looking for intervention, whatever, hopefully in the role that each of you play in the student assembly, you will be able to help them find what can get them through whatever situation they're in. So back to identifying resources. It all comes down to trust, okay? You have to trust that whoever you're going to approach, be it the counseling center, the wellness center, a private therapist, a church person, a faculty advisor, whoever it is, you need to be able to trust them. You're just not going to stop anybody on the street corner and ask them for help. So there's all kinds of areas where you can seek assistance if you trust the source of that. There could, as all the places I just said, there's also a whole plethora of online platforms. I mean, you can do anything online. You can find yoga, you can find meditation, you can find prayer groups, church groups, almost anything you can do, gym classes online, exercise classes online. And you really have to look at, get in touch with who you are, because what works for you may not be what's going to work for your friend. Okay, so just because your friend is going this direction doesn't mean that's going to fit you at all. So you really have to pay attention to what's going on inside of you. And it's very important to understand that any of the issues that you're facing, you shouldn't feel shame. You shouldn't feel shame that you're feeling anxious or that you're crying at the snap of a finger when perhaps you aren't somebody to cry or show emotion. We're under, all of us, faculty, students, family, anybody is under tremendous, extraordinary stress right now. Our country hasn't seen this kind of stress across the whole system since probably World War II. So we're in a very difficult time, and whatever you're feeling, whatever it is okay. And whatever you're feeling changes every day, perhaps, or in a few hours, or in a few seconds. That's how volatile we all are. So you have to pay attention to what's going on with you, and you have to give slack to everybody else around you, to your family, to your friends. If they're acting crazy or they're just stressing you out, you have to figure that out. And obviously, you're all off of campus now, but if there's somebody on campus that you trusted, you have to figure out how to connect with them, because everybody wants to support you right now. That's what we're here for. So with that said, okay, Dolores, you're on.
Okay, yes. And so following what Mary Ann was saying, how do we find sources of support on our campuses? Where are they? Now, as student leaders, you may in fact know where those sources of support are. And perhaps your role would be, in part, certainly, to let other students that you hear from who may feel that they're in distress or that they're stressed and that kind of thing, to actually help get them to the resources that would assist and support them. But that said, too, you're all human beings and you're affected just as much by what's going on around you, and as are your faculty, staff, parents, and families. So on a college campus, how do we find those resources that we need? To begin with, I would recommend that you seek out your student health center and or your counseling center. Now, different SUNY schools have different structures in terms of where these services are provided. Many do have counseling centers, and many do also have student health centers. And the counseling services may be within student health centers in some of the SUNY schools. In community colleges, it may well be that there is a person on campus that can give you information and referral. They may be in a disability office, or they may be in another office in student affairs, and their role is to refer students to places in the community. So there are a lot of ways to get counseling. When COVID started back in March, we at the University at Albany Counseling and Psychological Services moved very, very quickly to transition our services from in-person, face-to-face, to virtual services. So we use Zoom, and we use a secure version of Zoom, in fact, for protecting confidentiality, to do counseling sessions with our students. And if students prefer to be on the phone instead of on Zoom, that's fine with us as well. So and many counseling centers within the SUNY system have transitioned very successfully to virtual services. So I would encourage you, and I would encourage you to refer friends who may need counseling support to your counseling centers, because if they don't have virtual counseling as it is, as I just described it, they should have on their websites or at their phone numbers, places where you can be referred. There are also other support services on campus that we may not think of that can assist us. Our academic advising offices to help us deal with our academics and maybe dropping courses if we need to. Our educational opportunity programs office for students who need help with finances and academics. Financial aid offices. There are many schools now that are giving reimbursements to students because they've had to end their semesters early. So there are a lot of different supports on campus, and I'm going to stop right now and pass it back for the next slide.
Okay.
Thank you.
Prior to going on to slide 6, I also want to insert here that I think that we've been addressing this issue in a broad way in terms of, how you're feeling, counseling, those kinds of things. But I just want to drill down in 2 areas that this whole issue of, COVID could be impacting you. We have the issues of alcohol and drugs. Whatever your behaviors were previously, perhaps now they've increased or decreased. And it's important to pay attention to what you're doing every day in terms of alcohol and drugs. If you feel the need to self-medicate with either alcohol or drugs, you really need to pay attention to that, because that can be a downward slide and slope. So if those are the issues that you're having trouble with, or that you feel is getting out of control, again, there are resources on campus and also in each of your communities also. The other issue is around the issue of domestic violence, that we know there's been a surge in that area. And so if you're finding yourself in a situation with your family, a spouse, a partner, a friend, whoever, whatever, violence isn't ever okay. So what do you need to do about that? And again, there are a lot of places that you can reach out for help. So with that said,
There actually is a New York State COVID domestic violence hotline.
yes, there is.
Which we can share. And I also shared materials, which hopefully will be emailed to all of you, that we created at the University at Albany that address some of this. So hopefully you'll be able to get it in your hands as well.
And also, just before we move on, the slide at the end here does give all our contact information. So if there's any reason that you want to reach out today, tomorrow, sometime in the future, ask any questions, want any help, just ask.
And about those handouts, Dolores, the moderator for this should make that link available to the students right now who are watching. So that link should share those 5 handouts from Dr. Tremini.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we ready?
Yes.
So
Yes.
we've talked about self-care. We've talked about creating a self-care regime. We've talked about assessing yourself through those 8 areas of wellness, and we've provided some resources for you as student leaders on our campus. But now how do we create sustainability with that practice, and how do we keep ourselves accountable? As our environments are looking very different, you may, as student leaders, have developed some self-care routines and some self-care regimes while you were on campus. I'm sure you had a developed support group within your student committees that you're a part of, but now that you are removed from that, most likely it may look a little different. So keeping yourself accountable or sustainable or creating a new self-care regime may be difficult. So I'm going to talk about some tips that might be helpful for you in recreating that. So the first one is to set goals and set realistic expectations for yourself. So it's really important to look at what is possible. And as you're creating a self-care regime, this should not be something that is more difficult for you. It shouldn't make your routine more difficult. It's something that should be helpful, and it might require some extra practice at first as you're kind of learning what this looks like for you, but it certainly should not make things more difficult for you. So these can be short-term goals, it can be long-term goals. Something that's very helpful for me that I practice in my own self-care is creating a to-do list every morning. I'm a visual learner. That's something that's very helpful for me as an individual. And so that is also a tool that's helpful for me in accountability, so that I can look back at that at the end of the day to see, how I'm doing with my self-care on a daily basis. The next tip is to create a routine. So maybe it's when you first get up in the morning, doing something for your self-care. If you're not a morning person, then maybe it's in the afternoon or towards the end of your day. But creating that routine for daily self-care practice can be very helpful in keeping yourself accountable. My favorite tip is to get excited. Self-care is something that should be exciting, that makes you happy. And so I reference back to a blog that I was very into when I was in college that has now become a book called The Happiness Project. And it was written by Gretchen Rubin. And she talks about finding joy and creating joy in these small moments, making these little small changes in order to create happiness. And my favorite blog that she wrote about was about doing the dishes. So I am somebody who does not enjoy doing the dishes, but there are things that need to be done, right? So she talks about how when you're in this moment doing something that maybe not something that is pleasurable for you or something that you enjoy, trying to stop and take an inventory of what can you enjoy. So is it the warm water on your hands? Do you enjoy that feeling? Is it the smell of the soap? Is that something that's pleasurable for you? So so taking that time out to kind of figure out what can be helpful for you in those small moments and get excited about it. So the next tip is to avoid distractions. So I myself am distracted by the 3-minute warning, which I am aware of. But when you're in your house in a small space, there are plenty of distractions. And now I am one who loves an episode of Tiger King, and I'm definitely drawn to go watch Tiger King just as much as the next person, but I know that I have to remove myself from that and move myself into a separate space in order to achieve my self-care and achieve the things that I need to get done throughout the day. The next is to create a peer support group. And as our student leaders at SUNY, you kind of have a ready-made support group with your peers who are in this leadership group with you. But reach out to them, see if anybody is willing to help keep you accountable in that group. Maybe you can help them keep you accountable and vice versa. And lastly, check in with yourself. Maybe there's something that you tried out that was new within your self-care regime that is something that did not work out super well for you. Or maybe it's something that did work out for you that you want to try and practice more often or in a different way. So check in with yourself, try different things on and see what works for you. And remember to give yourself kindness, compassion, and grace throughout this whole process, because it's a very difficult time that we're going through. And like I said, creating the self-care regime should not create more stress for you. It should help reduce that.
Okay, and I don't think we're actually doing Q&A here. I don't think that's an option. Here's all the information on who presented this afternoon. Again, any questions, anytime, please contact us. Taryn, is there anything in the chat at all?
There are no questions as of right now, no.
Okay. 5:59, Taryn.
Thank you so much.
So with just a few seconds here to spare, I want to thank each of you that has, tuned in this afternoon. We would value some input from you also. So if you have time to share anything, if you found the information helpful, if you would like to find out anything else in the future. So I think that's all. On behalf of system administration, I want to thank the student assembly for hosting this event. And I also want to thank Dr. Tremini and Lauren Johnson also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
You too.
You too.